All right, so last cycle we saw the birth and boom of Degen farms in DeFi. What is a Degen farm? I'm talking about the Ohms, the Wonderlands, the Snow Dogs or Snowbanks. All of these projects I would consider Degen farms. These are the farms that would offer things like 10,000, even 100,000. I think I've seen even close to 1 million APY, which sounds amazing, right? Imagine depositing your money and literally doubling that money within days, sometimes hours. That sounds fantastic on paper, but is it sustainable? The answer to that is pretty obviously no. It cannot sustain, and I'm going to explain in this video why these projects fail, why they do not sustain, and how it really is just, you feel like you're getting rich on paper, but it's almost an illusion. And again, I'm not trying to attack these projects or call the developers idiots or anything like that. This is just literally the fundamentals of these projects and why they are flawed in their current structures. So, in order for us to get into that and truly understand that, we first have to understand the basic cookie cutter model of these projects, because for the most part, they're all structured very similar. They might have some tweaks that, are neat, but ultimately the idea, the fundamental structure is the same. The idea is that you take your money, you deposit it into the project, you buy the token first, right? So you buy the native token of the project, you then lock that token up. In exchange, you receive a reward. Now, these rewards are emissions. So what does that mean? It means that quite literally, if you're depositing into Wonderland, you would buy the time token, lock your time, and then you would receive time as a reward. That time reward is newly issued time, okay? 90% of the time, boom. It was at this moment that I realized I would never, ever make it as a comedian. 90% of the time, that money is new emissions. So it's like money getting printed out of the printer, okay? That's the reward you're given. Now, this seems great because on paper, what typically happens is people take that time, they relock it, and they just keep adding to their position with the rewards and compounding their position, which earns them more rewards. And on paper, it looks great. It looks like they're getting rich. But it's an illusion. Why is it an illusion? Well, because as we know, as you print things, you quite literally dilute the value. So the only way that a value of something can go up is if the value being input is always higher than the value being extracted, okay? Think of a Ponzi scheme, okay? These are very similar to Ponzi's. Why is that? Well, because in the early days of these projects, you get massive influxes of deposits. So the value being added to the project is more than the value being extracted. What does this cause? This causes the token's project, their token itself to go up. This causes rewards to go up. This causes the returns that people are getting from both the token price appreciation and the APY all to go up, which looks great. When people start to cash out and you end up in a situation where the value extracted is higher than the value input, what you now have is the value getting destroyed, which causes the token price to go down, which creates the death spirals that we often see in these projects. And I'm going to explain those in a little more detail because you can actually apply this similar idea to Luna as well. Now, Luna was a more complex ecosystem, but the idea remains very much the same. So there's a couple problems with this. Again, you have to always have new money coming in the door. You also have really high emissions. So in a perfect world, when these projects typically start, you have the price of the token is going up. So as the token price goes up, that's less they have to emit to reward you. So if they offer you 10% APY on your deposits, which in a Degen farm is low, I know that. When they offer you those rewards, they have to print enough of their token to equal out that 10%. Well, if their token price is going up in value, they have to print less of their tokens to give to you. That's a good thing, right? Because maybe in the beginning they had to print 10 of their tokens to equal 10% of the position you deposited. Well, now that their token price has gone up, they only have to give you one of their tokens to equal 10%. So you see how this is beneficial. As you know, in the early days, this is like increases and compounds the increase in price because the emissions technically slow down as the token price goes up. So it like creates these astronomical rises in price. Now, when the token price, as soon as it flips and it rolls over and it starts to come back down, you now have added emissions. Now, there's a couple things going on at this point. I'm going to call this the inflection point of the projects, and this is where these Degen farms go to die, okay? When you hit that inflection point, that's usually because sellers of the token outweigh the buyers. So you're entering a point of a dip. When there's no buyers that step in, what ends up happening is now it's got to, remember what we were saying about when the token price goes up, they have to issue less of their token to equal the 10%. Well, when token price goes down, they have to start emitting more of that token to equal that 10%. So if you keep the APY the same, you're going to end up in a situation, much like what happened to Luna, where as the token price continues to go down, you have to emit more, which is a compounding issue. So as you emit more, that's more selling pressure on the token, which causes the token to go down in price further, which causes it to emit more in rewards, and that's the death spiral. Okay, that's how these death spirals play out. It's really a lot simpler than people break it down, however, because you don't even need to understand how the death spiral happens to know the fundamental flaws. Dollar injection, you can't just create value out of thin air. You need people to bring in dollar value externally into your project. That is what increases the size of the pie, okay? The token emissions are quite literally an illusion, okay? You can't look at it in the aspect of how many tokens you hold, okay? Because if the token goes to zero, it doesn't matter how many tokens you hold. If the token price goes up, that's the only time it matters, but the only reason the token price goes up is because you have new external dollars coming into the project. That, again, is what creates the size of the pie. The more emissions, picture emissions as like a line through a pie, okay? So like you're cutting a slice of the pie. The more emissions, the more slices, but the pie itself is not getting bigger unless people bring in external money into the project. If there's no external money coming into the project, you're simply just slicing up the pie more and more and more, which means that's literally dilution. So you're diluting your position, which will cause the token price to go down, but the value in the project, assuming no one cashes out and nobody adds, the size of the pie stays exactly the same. So again, if you don't have external money coming into the project, you're really just slicing a pie a bunch of times. When you have external money coming in, the slices, like the pie is getting bigger, so the slices might remain the same size. Okay, I hope I'm not confusing you guys here, and I hope that this is like helping by talking about it in terms of pies more than it's hurting. But again, picture the pie getting bigger. Your slice of the pie is now the same, but you're getting more slices. So that is the beginning stages of these projects. As soon as the pie starts to shrink, the emissions have a compounded effect, right? So now the pie is shrinking when the price goes down, and value is being extracted more than is being input, which causes more emissions on a shrinking pie. So your slice of the pie keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it gets to zero, okay? Until there's nothing, there's no pie left. You're just slicing up nothing a trillion times with these emissions. The idea here is that you always have to have new value entering into these projects in order for them to sustain the models that most of them have. Again, you saw this in the case of Luna. In order for Luna to work, you have to have external money entering the ecosystem in order to sustain the APYs and things like that. Now, the other option is to shut down the APY or turn it way down, which can sometimes slow the bleed, but then the fundamentals of the project are still the same. You can still enter a death spiral. You're really just slowing things down. Same with the treasuries. I know there's some that, most of them hold treasuries that are used to buy back their token to create the buy pressure to jumpstart it. This is all fine and dandy, but if new money doesn't bite with that and choose to enter in and stay in, then it still is just you're just slowing the bleed. That's all you're doing. You're not actually solving the problem. You're just putting a temporary patch on it. This is what we see with most of these projects. Again, the idea is very simple. You always have to have more money coming in than money extracting. If you have more extracting, then you enter into a death spiral and it falls apart. You can't create value out of thin air. So printing more tokens does not create more value. I mean, this is quite literally why, like, the Federal Reserve doesn't just print $1 million for every U.S. citizen and just hand them $1 million and make them a millionaire. This is the premise of inflation. If they did that, the dollars they gave you would be worth way less than they were prior, because the value of the entire U.S. economy did not increase by that much. So again, these projects are really just ignoring the fundamentals of inflation. That's all that's really happening here. Because again, it doesn't work like that. You can't just print extra money. The Fed can't just print extra money, hand it to everybody to make them rich, because the value at the core is still the same, okay? The only way a project can gain more value is if more people bring in external money into it. So in the case of these Degen farms, as soon as the money coming in is lower than the money going out, that's when you end up in these problem situations, which is always going to be a reality. There's always going to be a point in time where a project has more money leaving than it does entering, especially when we're talking about bear markets and things like that. So this idea is the fundamental flaw behind Degen farms and why they can never work more than, we see them like maybe a couple months, and they have a very hard time sustaining. Once they hit that inflection point, once the price starts to roll over on the token and withdrawals exceed deposits, the game is over, okay? It's literally just Russian roulette in that sense. You don't know when that point's going to be. You're just hoping to get in and get out before that happens. And most speculators, that's what they plan on. But the issue is, if you're not perfect at that, then it doesn't even matter. You're going to get rolled over on. You're going to lose a bunch of money. So the risk reward there is astronomical. And again, this is the fundamental reason why these projects can't work, why printing tokens doesn't necessarily add value, right? Like if you're getting more tokens, that doesn't mean you're getting more value. That just means you're getting more of what is likely a declining in value token. So it just offsets. If you got 100 grand of deposits in a project and nothing gets withdrawn, it doesn't matter how many tokens you issue, the pie is still only $100,000 in size, okay? You're not creating value by printing the tokens. The only way you can create that value is if other people bring money into the project. So I wanted to bring this up to you guys. I hope this helps you guys understand these Degen farms, how they work, why the tokenomics are flawed, because I know a lot of retail investors get into them. They hear about them. Mark Cuban was even in one, where they're sitting there and they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm making all this money, all this interest. Why don't banks do this? Why don't banks just do this? Again, it's because you cannot create value out of thin air. 1,000% APY only works if you've got 1,000% of APY of new money coming into the project. If you don't have that much money coming in, it does not matter. You're still just slicing up, again, the amount of money in there. You're not actually adding value. So wanted to bring that up to you guys. The trick here is that most people keep their money in and they keep depositing more and more because they see on paper they're getting rich. But realistically, none of that is real money until you've cashed it out. So that is the illusion with these projects, is that you keep your money in, you keep compounding it, you think that you're winning until some big whale withdraws a ton of money, or the team itself, which we've seen a lot of times, withdraws a ton of money, and then you start to see the price decline, and at that point it is too late. You'll probably see a death spiral after that. So it's almost like the first one out wins, the first biggest player out wins. Like that's the game that is being played with these projects, which is why they're extremely risky. So again, guys, hope this helped you understand that. If this is your first video, please like and subscribe. We cover all things crypto on this channel, and I'd love to have you guys along for the journey. With that being said, I will see you next time.